Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for lunch with EFI. The two participants that we have here today, Matthew and Matt, are
Double Matt.
further away. Yeah, Matt squared. We are further away from lunch than we used to be on this podcast on the East Coast because we live in Arizona and we don't participate in daylight savings.
Right.
So,
in fact,
well,
we're doing a goal line stand against daylight savings. We're the last holdout, and we're not sure why the rest of y'all are still doing this.
yeah, come on, guys. Let's get with the program here. Daylight savings was useful when it helped sell Halloween candy, which is one of the conspiracy theories I've heard about why it was started in the first place. But anyway, welcome to Lunch with EFI. Thanks, Matt, for being here. We are going to start off with the first topic here, which is our appetizer, school choice versus school spending. So kick us off, Matt.
Good deal. Well, this is from a new study by Patrick Graff from the American Federation for Children. And you can find it in Education Next. And Patrick does a very good job of framing this issue, but basically he takes the spending and academic results literature at face value, right?
Okay.
The economists like Carabo Jackson have reported to find that if you spend a certain amount of money, then you get a certain amount of academic improvement. I must note at this point that this research is highly contested. Jackson himself has been demonstrated to be using some very creative methods that vary over time in producing these results. Literature reviews that code the same studies different ways as in a convenient fashion, that sort of thing.
Playing with p-values here and there.
Yeah, a little p hacking. Yeah. Let's just say that there was an old expression when I was in graduate school that my professors taught us, and that was that if you torture the data enough, it will confess. But
Right.
Patrick Graff is far more charitable to this body of literature and basically says, let's take it at face value. Let's assume the relationship exists. But then he compares those findings to the findings done by mostly David Figlio in measuring competitive effects on public schools and school choice. And he produces the following graph, which is basically showing us that, how much bang for the buck do we get from these various methods. And his conclusion is that even taking the, sort of Figlio research at its face value, that the impact of scaling up school choice in Florida between 2003 and 2017 was more than, well, and in fact, he words this very artfully and correctly, was at least 11 times greater than that of the spending increase. I think that's a good way to put it, because the actual impact of a spending increase could be nothing, right? But even taking it at face value from the scholars that purport to find this effect, it's a much bigger impact, a positive impact for school choice compared to increasing spending. So it's a good study. Go to Education Next and read it from front to cover.
That is a good, because, well, and it was smart to just take them at their word for this, right? Because he could have said that's garbage, but here's the real data, and this is, and then run it, right? I mean, he could have started in the right position
Right.
with you know, with maybe more realistic data, but it was really smart of him to just take them at their word and then run the numbers and see what happened. And this is a really interesting outcome.
Yes. Yeah, and it's if you think about the history of school spending, I mean, there's been substantial increases in per pupil funding in public schools over many decades, above and beyond inflation, right?
In every state of the
In,
union.
in every state in the union. And I've seen, when you really think through this is, at least in recent decades, very much the product of age demography in the country, right? Especially as we had this massive baby boom generation
Mm-hmm.
join the workforce, really reach their peak earning years in the 80s and 90s, right? And are now, sort of, well on their way to retiring out. By 2030, the last baby boomer will have reached the age of 65, right? So in that context, where this huge generation was at their peak earning and tax paying years, right? We had a lot of money, and we had a lot of money to do things like increase elderly benefits and increase K-12 spending at the same time. Looking forward, that's probably not the case, right? So even if one were to take this spending and outcomes data at face value, that doesn't mean we're going to have money to do it, right? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we also have reasons to be skeptical of it. And the great thing about school choice, of course, is that it's basically costless, right? If you structure it
Yeah.
correctly, right? You're making better use of the resources we already put in the system.
Yeah, really. I mean, there isn't a school choice program that's been introduced and actually is functioning currently. I don't know if there's ever been one that's been introduced either, by the way, but certainly not one that's been introduced and is functioning in this country that has cost taxpayers more than what is going on a per pupil basis than what is going toward district schools.
It's
So
almost
there's that
always been less,
savings,
including charter schools, right? I mean,
including charters.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
that's right. So
So that's interesting. Well, yeah, that's good. When did that study come out? When did this?
very recently, I think maybe even this week. So it's at Education Next, and um, go check it out.
Okay, yeah, I'll check that out. And maybe we'll post on X on EFI's account here later the links to some of these stories that we do, so people can follow up with them.
Okay.
Great, that's good. Okay, well, the next topic that we're going to hit for our main dish is 3-year degrees are good. So, I've been thinking about this, and it actually just, I'm going to put a little plug in here for EFI's new AI powered news aggregator.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a pretty cool little web page that went live last week on EFI's website. So if you go to efinstitute.org/education-news and you visit that page, there's just link after link with kind of a headline, a summary of what the news story is about, and then it will actually break out. It gives you 3 bullet points about what's included in the article, and then the last thing is how does this affect school choice / educational freedom summary, and how it's related to the work that we do at EFI. So plug for the news aggregator. But I jumped over there in preparation for today's Lunch with EFI podcast, what we're doing here right now. And I was looking through some of the different topics that were kind of timely and news stories that had come out, and um, this one popped up. That 3-year degrees were one news article. In fact, it might be in here. No, it doesn't say here, but one of the news articles that I was looking at in preparation for this said that there's going to be, or there is currently, a rapid move toward 3-year degree programs generally in higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been hearing about that. This isn't news to us, Matt. I mean, if you live in this space, 3-year degrees are nothing new. They're certainly not old. I wouldn't say that we've been hearing about it for 20 years necessarily. But what is interesting is that we're starting to see movement across states now. And it looks like maybe it's gaining some traction. So I've just pasted in here 3 different stories from 3 different states: Wisconsin, Massachusetts, and Virginia, where they just call attention to this idea that, and so I wanted the 3-year degree. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I think it's good for a lot of reasons. I think that the benefits far outweigh the costs. I think you'd be hard pressed to convince me anyway that 4th year is so vital that we just can't do without it.
Yeah.
And you can take the ideological stance on that and say we don't need our kids' heads full of useless and or woke ideas that have no basis in reality, that are social activism, that are social engineering, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a perfectly valid take on it. But even for a technical degree, I think you could say, look, most of the woke kind of stuff isn't in these programs anyway. So keep the 4th year because they're not getting that stuff. Certainly if the majority of their focus is on the hard sciences or something. And you might have a point there from the ideological standpoint, but then my response would be, but why? Like for years now, not this year, I mean for years now, it's been part of the hiring policy of some of the biggest tech firms on the planet, not just in our country, but on the planet, that they don't require bachelor's degrees anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, Google and Facebook, Google and Meta have not required bachelor's degrees for new hires. I heard about it maybe starting 4 or 5 years ago, maybe as far back as 2020.
Yeah.
And the point is, and I think it's a perfectly valid reason from the employer standpoint, they don't care if you have a 4-year degree. You know what they care about? Can you do the job?
Right. Yeah, no, I had a friend who was a programmer, and he told me that he tended to actually favor hiring programmers that didn't have degrees.
Yeah.
And Matt, if you don't like the 4th year, what do you think about the 7th year? Is this
I'm not pointing any fingers here, but
or years ago, the then mayor of Tempe, Arizona, testified to the legislature about something that pertaining to Arizona State. And in his testimony, he bragged about Arizona State students having the highest beer consumption rates in the world.
Bragged.
And that's how I interpreted it, because he said, that's okay because we were all young ones, right? And I remember writing a piece for the Goldwater Institute, and I said, hey, look, I don't want to be a prude. I went to college. I drank my share of beer while I was at college, and I drank someone else's share as well. But What I did is I graduated in 4 years, and that had become very unfashionable. you know, like
Yeah.
people weren't doing that anymore, and so I think I remember using the phrase 6 year beer soaked odysseys of personal self discovery that result in a graduation half the time.
it, sound, it sounds like one of these, you know, monographs that are published in communications journals where it's like my experience hiking through Nepal or like that somehow has some bearing on academic literature.
Right.
uh,
Yeah, no, academia is in trouble and they know it, because the baby bust has arrived at their shores, and young people are very skeptical about the value of higher education, and justly so, right?
yes.
It doesn't mean everyone has to go, get $750,000 of debt, getting a French literature degree from Stanford and work as a barista. That may have happened to someone. They write about them when it happens, right? But it's like, it doesn't have to happen to you,
Yeah.
right? And I'm also very interested in this research that basically shows what your degree is far more important than where you get it from, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So if you're getting a French literature degree from Stanford, no bueno.
Well, I went to Stanford to get my underwater basket weaving degree.
Well, do you remember the headline of the Wall Street Journal last year where they said that the headline was literally "Sorry, Harvard, everyone wants to go to college in the South now."
I do remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, this gets down to kind of, it's an interesting story, and I think, I don't know what your take on this is, but I'll tell you, and it's anecdotal. I'll admit up front, but COVID, I think, like snapped a lot of people back into reality, and in a lot of ways. But I'll tell you, I'll try to keep this story brief. But in 2020, our oldest daughter was a junior in high school. So she was near the end of her junior year when school shut down in the spring of that year. When everyone was still unsure, by the end of summer, if school would come back into session at all, well, in person, right? I mean, there was a lot didn't, of course. In Arizona, a lot did. It was delayed that they went back in person. It was virtual to start, but there were a lot of schools and other states as well. But in talking with our daughter, my wife and I, and this is such a weird thing because I have a master's degree and I went to grad school. Well, this is going to sound funny, but I mean it, on purpose. Right? I went to grad school on purpose, and I learned a lot of things there, and we joke about it, but it's real. Some of the least intelligent people that I know have 3 letters after their names. Now, having said that, the opposite is also true. But my point is that my time in grad school actually informed my conversations with my daughter and my wife about what my daughter would do in the fall of 2020, her senior year. And this is what happened. So she said, as we were talking to her, because again, it was very touch and go, as was for everybody with school that year, we ended up deciding to support her in her decision to just get her GED, take the test out of her senior year, and go to work, which is a really strange thing. And she ended up going on to, pursuing a cosmetology certificate afterward. But But if you had told my 2003 self that that is what my senior daughter would be doing in her senior year and that I would be fully supporting it,
Mhm.
I would have laughed you right out of the house and like, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It just would not have been in the least bit convincing. My point with all of this is in relation to what we're talking about here, I fully support 3-year degrees. I fully support 2-year teacher degrees in the style of the old normal schools. Get them the information that they need and get out. I absolutely 100% support uh, training certificates in hard skills that are measurable and testable. If you know how to code, uh, then show me that you can do it and I'll hire you. If you know how to plumb a house or run wire, I show me and I'll hire you. I mean, this is
Mhm.
it, the value. What you said earlier is 100% true. The value of the piece of paper that you get at the end of your 4-year stint, 6, 7-year stint, whatever it is, isn't what it used to be. And I think it's rapidly declining.
Right. It's at least the perception of it is. It's so opaque that it's hard. It's hard to measure the value of these things. Now there are people that do it indirectly in terms of labor market success and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And there are people that are pushed back and say, no, it's actually not declining. I don't know, I don't know how that washes out. But I mean, the level of cost inflation, and like this is completely the result of public policy. Like you cannot have something just go into permanent hyperinflation for decades. Like,
Like it
that
has.
doesn't happen unless the government is messing it up really badly, right? Um, and so I remember the class before, like the freshman class before I started at the University of Texas was paying $4 a semester hour to attend the University of Texas. And by the time I got there, I think they boosted it to 16. And boy, the natives were up in arms. They were restless and talking about, how outrageously expensive that was. And
Which now is a bargain.
yeah, this is all just in the late 80s, right? Now, like we wouldn't even want to dare look up to see what it is, right? Because it's going to be so ridiculously expensive. And so colleges have become enormously more expensive and ambiguously, if at all, better, right? Or more useful.
Right. If at all is the right way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, you know, the one thing that I'll say, what it still has going for it is that there is at least some use in viewing a degree as a proxy for a couple of things.
Hmm.
One, work ethic. Did you just or willing to put up with how
Yeah.
much are you willing to put up with and power through?
Yep.
Yes, I think that's a fair assessment. That I don't know that that's diminished at all. But the problem I think that employers are having today, and not just like, red meat Republican Trump supporters, I think across the board, I think people have a concern that there is the counterbalance to that, the potential downside is real of getting a degree and having spent that much time in a place that doesn't necessarily value reality and truth,
Right.
um, and and will teach you otherwise at every opportunity. So I think that using it as a proxy is still it's a heuristic. It's a shortcut that says, okay, you've put in a lot of work and you've shown some amount of dedication, and this degree proves that. Maybe it doesn't prove that you know a lot of stuff, but it proves that you stuck out a program.
I mean,
And there's some value there.
graduate school is the same way. It's like
Yeah.
I went to graduate school, and I do have those dread three letters. And I mean, graduate school is a hazing incident. It's a multi-year hazing incident, right? That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I totally agree with what you said earlier. Some of the biggest dingbats I've ever met in my life had PhDs.
It's incredible, actually.
It's really amazing, right? And I'm sure the audience is saying, including you, Ladner, and I won't deny it, right? But
Right. Guilty.
guilty, right? But
Mm.
boy, yeah, I mean, it's basically a hazing incident, and so, but an undergraduate degree is kind of like, yeah, can you show up on time enough to get out? Like, can you navigate a complex bureaucracy? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Right now, can you navigate this bureaucracy as opposed to that one? Apparently, the labor market doesn't really care that much about that.
Mhm.
What kind of degree you get, they do care about that, right?
Right.
Apparently, from what I understand of the research. So, yeah, it's a different mess than K-12, but it's a mess.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's jump off of that and let's get over to our dessert.
All right. All right. So another study. This one is done by Available to All, and it has a great title, just and stay out. Right?
Yeah. I like
So it's about New York, and Available to All has done a lot of research like this that is basically studying how district attendance boundaries are gerrymandered, like beyond whatever they were doing in the 19th. So, well, they're still doing it today, to draw congressional lines in a very exclusionary fashion, right? Um, and so I just saw this study this morning. Got to digging into a little bit. One of the punchlines of the study is, what do you do about this? And part of the answer is you create more schools that aren't tied to where you live.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. No attendance boundaries.
Yeah, charters, even magnets. Interestingly, this new mayor of New York has described New York as having the most segregated, public school system in America. What's in this Available to All study would seem to back that up.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I would also mention that the Stanford Educational Opportunity Project last year created something they called the Segregation Explorer, and it's very complex. They have measures of like how much white students are exposed to black students in their school and how much black students are exposed to white students. But looking at their lens through the prism of white-black segregation, the most segregated public school system in the country, something like 26 years running. I think their data started back in 1991 and went, all the way to more recent, was New York. Right.
That's so interesting because I read a book. You may have read this book too. I don't remember the name of it, but there was a guy that wrote a book about LA and the redlining. Do you remember this? It was
yes, yeah. That's the same research. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I thought that I don't remember him talking about New York.
Yeah, this may be just they've just kind of focused in on New York now, but yeah, it's the same kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
It's very clear that attendance boundaries were very purposefully drawn.
Yeah.
We're going to have the rich kids over here and the poor kids over there. In fact, if you think about Austin, Texas, have you been to Austin, Matt?
Oh yeah.
So in Austin, Houston, right, I-35 is like goes right down the center of Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And it was known as the interracial highway, right? Because on the east side of Austin, and the segregationists actually use schools to segregate the city, right? they put the schools that Black and Hispanic students were allowed to go to on the east side of the highway,
Mm-hmm.
and student right, and and that is still very visible in the data to this day, right? That it's probably less than it was in the past.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean, you often see school choice opponents just make very sloppy claims about segregation. Oh, school choice is resegregating schools. Like, really? When did they desegregate? Because I missed that part. Did that happen at some point? Or there was an effort to do it, but did it actually happen? Right?
This is great. One of my favorite things to do is, and one of the most popular pages on EFI's website for years now has been the school choice hypocrisy map,
Mm-hmm.
where we map elected officials um, by state where they are and whether or not they went to private schools and fight against or send their own kids to private schools. That's really
Yeah.
the main point, because they didn't, in most choices, in most cases anyway, they didn't have a choice in where their parents sent them, but they certainly have a choice in where they send their own kids. So they'll send their kids to private schools but then fight against school choice for others. And so there was a lady, this was a fun one just as an example, in Tennessee. I want to say she's in Knoxville, if I remember right, a member of the school board there
Mm-hmm.
that was, railing against school choice and how we can't have charter schools or vouchers or ESAs or anything of the sort because it will segregate schools. She, in another social media post, had posted that she was going to her daughter's school to see a play or something, and she mentioned the name of the school. And if you look at the school boundaries, you
Yeah.
just do a little digging, like the average home price in this catchment area for that school
Mm-hmm.
is one of the highest in the state. And so, and then you look at the demographics of the school, which you can pull from a couple of different sources. NCES is kind of an easy one. And it's like, it's not even close to diverse,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like
No
these
kidding.
people are
Well,
great.
this is part of the real value of available to all's research, is because a lot of people start with this baseline assumption that the public schools are integrated,
Yeah.
and any kind of choice system is increasing segregation. Well, first of all, the increasing segregation part is false, right? Also, their underlying assumption is false. Public schools are not integrated, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's just take the issue of just by income, right? How integrated by income do we expect the schools in North Scottsdale to be, for instance, or
Yeah.
Highland Park in Dallas or whatever, right? The reality
Not
is
at all.
the public school system itself is fundamentally based upon a system of economic and de facto racial segregation, right? Like,
Yeah.
that is the baseline. And it's so kind of like it's so like people view it as so normal, right? That they don't even realize it, right? I remember, um, I mean, I grew up in East Texas, right? And there was, I believe, one Black student in my entire school district, not in
Mm.
my grad. She happened to be in my graduating class, but not just like the entire school district, the elementary schools, middle schools, and we had one high school in my district, right? And like, but I hear people talk all the time acting like, oh, our public school systems are integrated, right? When you base school attendance based on where you live, because housing patterns themselves are very segregated,
Yeah.
you result in very segregated schools. And then you see these enormously sloppy things, like someone wrote a column for the Arizona Capital Times a few years ago, that claimed that Arizona schools are more segregated now than they were in the 1950s. And, you know, I mean, this was so false in so many ways.
Yeah.
It's not backed up by the data at all. The schools were way more segregated back then, and no matter how you want to measure it, right? And in fact, special needs students were completely excluded from attending public schools at all,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
know, and so that same Stanford Educational Opportunity Project data shows that the by their measures, segregation has gone down in Arizona, which of course has a lot of school choice. And in the recent reading, the most recent reading for Arizona was exactly one half the highest reading for New York, which was back in 1991, right? So New York has always been a super segregated public school system and is still the champion of segregation. And it is worth noting that this is all happening in a blue state, which
For decades of being a blue state now. I
right.
mean, it's not like they haven't had some opportunity to undo what.
I mean, last time I checked, Randy Weingarten came straight out of New York, right?
Yeah.
Her union has a lot of influence in New York, but strangely has never gotten around to doing anything about this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one. So, available to all is the name of the organization.
And stay out. Yeah, you can go to the website and find this study, and this is where this is the group that does the research. Well, they actually show you the maps, and you're like, wow, how can you even draw something that convoluted, right?
Right. It's all these little crazy jagged lines and lines.
It's like these are some very carefully drawn lines.
Okay, well, we'll check it out. I think I'll do that. I'll send out the links to these later today so that people can follow up and read up on the studies and stories we've referenced. But that's it for today. So thanks for jumping in here, Matt, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. We appreciate it.
Good deal. See you next time.
All right.